Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, I need to tell you something. This one hit me differently. By the time you reach the ending, you'll understand why I had to share it. There's a moment coming that will make you question everything you thought you knew about strength, about love, and about the walls we build to protect ourselves. But here's what I want you to do. Stay until the very end because what happens in the final scene changed how I see single parents forever. If this story moves you the way it moved me, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me what part touched you most. Trust me, you'll want to be part of this community. Now let me take you to a small coastal town in Oregon where a single father was about to have the most dangerous night of his life. Marcus Chen had been awake for 37 hours straight. His eyes burned as he stared at the spreadsheets on his laptop, the numbers blurring together like watercolors in rain. Downstairs, his 7-year-old daughter Lily was finally sleeping, her small body curled around the stuffed elephant that had belonged to her mother. The elephant was losing its stuffing now, just like Marcus felt he was losing pieces of himself every single day. The knock on his home office door made him jump. He wasn't expecting anyone at 11:30 at night. When he opened it, the last person he expected to see was standing there with a folder in her hands and concern written across her face. Victoria Reese was his boss at the architectural firm where he'd worked for 3 years. She was 34, only 2 years older than him, but she carried herself with the kind of authority that made people twice her age listen when she spoke. Tonight, though, she looked different. Her usually perfect blonde hair was slightly windswept, and she was wearing jeans instead of her typical business attire. "Victoria," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. "What are you doing here?" She held up the folder. "The Morrison Project. I was driving home from my sister's place and realized we never finished reviewing the structural changes. I saw your light on." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, his body suddenly aware of how close she was standing. He could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm that he'd never allowed himself to notice during work hours. "You could have called. Your phone's been going straight to voicemail for 6 hours, Marcus." "I was worried." He pulled his phone from his pocket and saw the dead screen. He'd forgotten to charge it again. That was happening more and more lately. Forgetting things. Dropping balls. Falling behind on everything except keeping Lily alive and somewhat happy. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "But we need to be quiet. Lily's sleeping." Victoria stepped into his home for the first time in the 3 years they'd worked together. He watched her take in the modest living room with its mismatched furniture and the crayon drawings taped to every available wall surface. He saw her notice the pile of laundry he hadn't gotten to yet, the dishes in the sink visible through the kitchen doorway, the general chaos of a life held together by determination and not much else. If she judged him, she didn't show it. Instead, she simply said, "Nice place. It feels lived in." That's a polite way of saying it's a mess. "No," she said, turning to look at him with those gray-green eyes that always seemed to see too much. "It's a polite way of saying a child is loved here. There's a difference." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. Just a small fissure, but enough to let in a tiny bit of light he hadn't felt in years. He quickly pushed it down. They sat at his small dining table, spreading out the Morrison blueprints between them. For an hour, they worked through the structural changes, their heads bent close together over the documents. Marcus tried to focus on load-bearing walls and foundation depths, but he kept getting distracted by the way Victoria absently tucked her hair behind her ear, by the small laugh she gave when she made a mistake, by the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. At one point, he got up to make coffee. When he returned with 2 mugs, he found her standing in front of the fireplace mantel, looking at the photographs displayed there. "Is this her?" Victoria asked softly, pointing to a picture of a smiling woman with dark hair and Lily's exact same dimples. "Lily's mother?" "Sarah." "Yes. She was beautiful." "She was everything," Marcus said, and his voice betrayed him by breaking slightly on the last word. He set down the coffee mugs harder than he intended. Victoria turned to face him fully. Marcus, how long has it been? 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days. He didn't even have to think about it. The number lived in his bones. And how long has it been since you let anyone help you? The question hit him like a physical blow. He took a step back, his walls slamming up so fast he could almost hear them. The Morrison Project. We should finish reviewing it. I have to be up in 4 hours. But Victoria didn't move back to the table. Instead, she took a step closer to him. I've watched you for 3 years, Marcus. You come in early. You stay late. You do the work of 2 people and never complain. You pick up Lily from school exactly at 3:15 every single day, and you still manage to outperform everyone else in the firm. But I've also watched you disappear. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You used to smile. You used to make jokes in meetings. You used to be the person everyone wanted on their project because you brought energy and creativity and life to everything you touched. Now you're a ghost, Marcus. You're haunting your own existence. His hands were shaking. He shoved them into his pockets to hide it. You don't know anything about my existence. I know you haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. I know you work through lunch every single day. I know that last Christmas, when everyone else was at the office party, you were alone at your desk finishing a project that wasn't even due for 2 weeks. I had work to do. You were hiding. You're always hiding. And I understand why, because the alternative is feeling things, and feeling things is terrifying when you've already felt the worst thing a person can feel. Marcus's breath was coming faster now. He could feel the panic rising in his chest, the way it always did when someone got too close to the truth. Victoria, you should go. I know, she said softly. I should go. It's late, and this is inappropriate, and tomorrow we'll both pretend this conversation never happened. But before I leave, I need you to know something. She took another step closer, and now they were standing close enough that he could see the small scar above her left eyebrow, the one she'd never explained. Close enough that he could see the vulnerability she was usually so careful to hide. I see you, Marcus Chen. Not the perfect employee. Not the devoted single father. Not the tragic widower. I see you. The person underneath all those roles who is so desperately tired of carrying everything alone but too proud and too scared to ask for help. Why are you saying this? His voice was barely a whisper. Because someone needs to. Because 3 years ago, I lost someone too. Not a spouse, but my little brother. And I spent 2 years convincing myself that if I just kept moving, kept working, kept pushing through, I wouldn't have to feel the hole he left behind. I almost worked myself to death, Marcus. Literally. I collapsed at my desk and woke up in a hospital with a doctor telling me my heart was failing from stress. Marcus stared at her. In 3 years of working together, she had never shared anything personal with him. None of them had shared anything personal with her. She was the boss, the untouchable one, the woman who seemed to have everything figured out. That's why I went to my sister's tonight, Victoria continued. Today would have been Danny's 30th birthday. And instead of working through it like I used to, I went to her house and we looked at old photos and we cried together. For the first time in years, I let someone see me grieve. She reached out and touched his arm gently. Just a simple touch, but it sent electricity through his entire body. I'm not trying to fix you, Marcus. I'm not trying to take Sarah's place or pretend I understand exactly what you're going through. I just want you to know that you don't have to be strong every minute of every day. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to need people. Marcus felt the walls inside him beginning to crumble. 3 years of grief, of loneliness, of exhaustion, of pretending he was fine when he was anything but fine. It was all pressing against the dam he'd built, and Victoria was standing there with her kind eyes and her unexpected vulnerability, and for the first time in so long, he wanted to let someone in. But wanting and doing were two different things. "Victoria," he said, and his voice came out rough and desperate. "If you stay tonight, I might lose the strength I've been holding." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. He watched her face as she processed what he was really saying. Not an invitation. A warning. A confession of how fragile he truly was, how close he was to breaking apart completely. "And what happens if you lose it?" she asked softly. "I don't know. I've never let myself find out. I've been holding it together for Lily, for my job, for everyone who depends on me. If I let go, I don't know if I'll be able to put myself back together." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised him completely. She sat down on his worn leather couch and looked up at him with an expression of infinite patience. "Then let's find out together. Not tonight, not all at once. But I'm going to sit here with you, and you're going to drink your coffee, and we're not going to talk about work or about being strong or about anything that requires you to perform. We're just going to exist in the same space for a little while. And if you fall apart a little, I'll still be here when you're ready to start putting the pieces back together." Marcus stood there, frozen between the person he'd been forcing himself to be and the person he actually was. Every instinct told him to ask her to leave, to protect himself, to maintain the careful distance he'd cultivated from everyone in his life. But his body was so tired. His heart was so heavy. And Victoria was looking at him like he was worth waiting for, like his brokenness didn't scare her, like maybe she understood because she'd been broken too. He sat down on the couch next to her. Not touching, but close enough that he could feel her warmth. And for the first time in 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days, Marcus Chen let himself stop being strong. The tears came slowly at first, then faster. He cried for Sarah, for the future they were supposed to have together, for the way Lily asked about her mother less and less because it hurt too much to remember. He cried for all the nights he'd lain awake wondering if he was enough, if he was ruining his daughter by not being able to give her a complete family. He cried for the loneliness that had become so familiar he'd forgotten what connection felt like. Victoria didn't try to stop him. She didn't offer platitudes or solutions. She simply sat beside him, a steady presence in the storm of his grief, occasionally placing her hand on his back when the sobs became too violent. At some point, he heard small footsteps on the stairs. He looked up to see Lily standing in the doorway in her elephant pajamas, clutching the stuffed animal that was all she had left of her mother. "Daddy? Why are you crying?" Marcus wiped his face quickly, the old instincts kicking in. "Nothing, sweetheart. Go back to bed." But Lily didn't move. Instead, she walked into the room with all the determination of a 7-year-old who had already seen too much of the world's unfairness. She climbed onto the couch and wedged herself between Marcus and Victoria, wrapping her small arms around her father's waist. "It's okay to cry, Daddy. Miss Patterson says tears are how we let the sad out so there's room for the happy again." Marcus looked down at his daughter, this incredible little person who had inherited her mother's wisdom and her father's stubborn heart. He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "When did you get so smart?" "I was always smart. You just weren't listening good." Victoria laughed softly, and Marcus found himself smiling despite the tears still drying on his cheeks. He looked at this woman who had shown up unexpectedly and somehow cracked open the shell he'd been hiding inside. "Victoria, this is my daughter, Lily. Lily, this is my boss, Miss Victoria." Lily studied Victoria with the intense scrutiny only children can manage. "Are you the lady who makes my daddy work late sometimes?" Victoria had the grace to look slightly guilty. "Sometimes, yes. I'm sorry about that." "It's okay. Daddy says you're really smart and you make the buildings stay up so they don't fall on people." "He said that?" Lily nodded seriously. He says you're the best at building math. But he also says you work too hard and someone should make you take a vacation. Marcus groaned. Lily, we talked about not repeating everything Daddy says. But Victoria was smiling, a real smile that transformed her entire face. Is that so? Well, maybe your daddy is right. Maybe I do need a vacation. Maybe we all do. Lily's eyes went wide. We never get vacations. Daddy says vacations are for people who don't have bills. Lily, Marcus said, mortified. But Victoria just laughed again. Your daddy sounds like someone I used to know. Me, actually. I used to think the same thing. But you know what I learned? Lily shook her head. I learned that vacations aren't about not having bills. They're about remembering why you work so hard in the first place. They're about making memories with the people you love so that when you're old and gray, you have stories to tell. Lily considered this seriously. Then she turned to Marcus. Daddy, I want to make memories before you're old and gray. Marcus felt his heart expand in a way he hadn't thought possible anymore. He looked at Victoria over his daughter's head and saw something shift in her expression. Something soft and hopeful and terrifying all at once. Victoria, can you come to our house again? Lily asked. Daddy never has friends over. I think he's lonely. Lily, Marcus warned. Well, you are. You talk to the plant sometimes. Victoria pressed her lips together, clearly trying not to laugh. I would love to come visit again, Lily. If that's okay with your dad. Marcus looked at his daughter, then at Victoria, then at the mess of his life spread out around them. The laundry, the dishes, the grief, the chaos. And somehow, in the middle of all of it, a moment of grace. Yeah, he said quietly. That's okay with me. Over the next few weeks, something shifted in Marcus's world. Victoria started coming by after work occasionally, always with the excuse of a project to review or a document to sign. But they both knew the real reason. She'd stay for dinner sometimes, helping Lily with homework while Marcus cooked. She'd tell stories about the buildings she'd helped design, making Lily's eyes go wide with wonder. Marcus watched his daughter bloom under the attention of another adult, watched the way she started to smile more, laugh more, ask endless questions about everything. And he felt something thawing in his own chest, something that had been frozen for so long he'd forgotten it was there. One Saturday afternoon, Victoria showed up with a kite. A bright red dragon kite that she'd found at a shop downtown. I thought we could go to the beach, she said. I know a spot where the wind is perfect. Lily practically vibrated with excitement. Marcus wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the safe boundaries he'd spent years building. But Lily was already putting on her shoes, and Victoria was looking at him with that patient expression that somehow made him feel like he could do anything. They drove to the coast, to a small stretch of sand that Victoria said she'd discovered years ago. The wind was strong and cold, whipping their hair and making Lily shriek with delight. Marcus watched Victoria try to launch the kite, failing spectacularly 3 times before finally getting it airborne. Your turn, she called to him, holding out the string. I don't know how to fly a kite, he admitted. Neither do I, obviously. But that's the point. We're figuring it out together. He took the string from her, their fingers brushing in a way that felt far too significant for such a simple touch. The kite dipped and soared above them, and Lily ran in circles on the sand below, trying to catch its shadow. This was Sarah's thing, Marcus said quietly. She loved the beach. We used to come here before Lily was born and talk about all the things we were going to do. All the places we were going to take our kids. Victoria stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. What places? Paris. Tokyo. The Grand Canyon. She had a list. She was always making lists of things she wanted to experience. And then she got sick, and the list stopped mattering. They still matter, Marcus. They matter because they tell you who she was. What she loved. What she wanted for her family. He watched Lily spinning on the sand, her laughter carrying on the wind. She wanted this, he said. She wanted Lily to be happy. To be free. To have adventures. Then give her that. Give her the adventures. You don't have to do all of them, but do some of them. Honor Sarah by living the life she wanted for your family, not by putting yourself in a cage of grief. Marcus felt the familiar sting of tears, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. That night, after Victoria had gone home and Lily was asleep, Marcus pulled out a box he hadn't opened since Sarah died. It was full of her things. Her journals, her sketches, her lists. He'd been too afraid to look at them, too terrified of what it would feel like to touch the physical evidence of her absence. But now, with shaking hands, he opened the first journal. Her handwriting filled the pages, messy and exuberant, just like she'd been. He read about her dreams, her fears, her endless love for him and for the baby growing inside her. He read about her plans for their future, her hopes for who Lily would become. And then he found a letter. Tucked between the pages, addressed to him in Sarah's handwriting. Dated 3 months before she died, when she'd already known the cancer was winning. My dearest Marcus. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone and you've finally been brave enough to open this box. I know you, my love. I know you'll try to be strong. I know you'll put on a mask and pretend you're fine because that's what you think Lily needs. But here's what I need you to know, strength isn't pretending. Strength is feeling the grief and getting up anyway. Strength is letting people in even when it's terrifying. Strength is loving again, even when you've lost. I need you to live, Marcus. Not just exist. Not just survive for Lily's sake. I need you to find joy again. I need you to let someone love you, and I need you to let yourself love them back. If I could choose anyone to take care of you and Lily after I'm gone, I vow.